Hello and welcome to the PowerTest 25 conference in Orlando, hosted by NETA. I'm Ellen Parson, Editor-in-Chief of EC&M, and I'm here in Orlando to learn everything I can about electrical safety and power reliability with some of the leading subject matter experts in the field. And today I have with me one of those subject matter experts, Lanny Floyd, Adjunct Professor, Principal Consultant, Electrical Safety and Technology, the University of Alabama at Birmingham. You also formerly worked for DuPont, retired from DuPont. Yes. So Lanny, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today. You had a presentation earlier that you gave to the PowerTest audience on advanced risk factors for electrical safety, a very, very important topic. Yep. So we're so glad you took time to come by and tell us about that today.
I have a great admiration for EC&M and NETA and PowerTest, so I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful, thanks. Well, let's get into kind of the key takeaways from your presentation. So you started off with explaining that, you've been doing this, an expert in this for years and years. So after more than 30 years of a steady decline in the occupational electrical fatalities, we're talking about the United States, the trend, you said, for the last decade has basically been flat. So why do you think that is, and kind of explain for our audience what you think's behind this trend? Kind of pick your brain there.
Well, that's a great question, Ellen. And I think the downward trend over the last 50 years has been very significant. Certainly in the early 1980s, late 70s, there were close to 8 or 9 or 10 times as many electrical fatalities as we're experiencing today. And that's not taking consideration that the workforce today is almost double what it was in 1980. Certainly the emergence of OSHA regulations in the 1970s and the electrical specific regulations in the 1990s, and the emergence of NFPA 70E in the they really focus on the safe work practices in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
But that's not the only thing. If you look at the number of electrocutions in the U.S. since 1970, the emergence of the requirements for the ground fault circuit interrupter has been extremely significant.
Right.
Extraordinary. I mean, there were close to 1,000 electrocutions in the U.S. in 1970 that were related to exposures that ground fault circuit interrupter would have caught.
Okay.
Today, there's very few. They still do occur, but I think what has happened is that we're now very close to being saturated with GFCIs where they need to be, and therefore we're seeing
that makes sense.
A less decline as we add more GFCIs.
Not so drastic.
We're not going to see that big a decline. So there are other technology issues as well. A lot of advancements in the technology to reduce exposure to arc flash hazards, as well as the safe work practices that are in the OSHA regulations and NFPA 70. They all work together. They have all contributed to that reduction. But your question was, we're flat. So what do we need to do differently? And there are some things that industry leaders and safety professionals are pointing their fingers toward. And that's one of the things I talked about in my session today.
Okay, wonderful. So what were the new approaches? I know you talked about that, the organizations like OSHA, NIOSH, National Safety Council introduced that could redefine the way that you're not only assessing those, but mitigating the risks.
Yeah. Well, this flattening over the last 15 years has not just been limited to electrical fatalities, but it's characteristic of all hazards that have fatality as a credible outcome. Working at heights, confined space, being caught within machinery, industrial trucks like cranes and forklifts and all that.
Right.
The fatalities from those exposures have also been flat. So, and that's about 5,000 a year. So that's a large number. So there's been a lot of focus on that.
And those OSHA violations are always the same. The top 10 list, it's always, they don't really, they change order, but they don't change, really.
And so industry leaders in safety management have been bringing some focus to that. And so are some things such as serious injury and fatality prevention. That's a program targeted to those hazards that have high credibility for fatality. The Prevention Through Design initiative launched in 2007 by NIOSH, again, is focused on all hazards, but in particular those hazards that have high likelihood of being fatal.
Okay.
So there's been several things that have been targeted in a much broader area, but we need to make sure that we're applying those in the electrical the electrical hazard space as well.
Okay, one of the things you brought up in the presentation I thought was pretty fascinating was that about the human brain and decision making, what that plays in the role of electrical safety. And so how can expanding our understanding of the risk factors, you talked a lot about that, can that help improve the safety outcomes?
I believe it can. The vulnerability to injury is something that is very important in helping people understand why rules, regulations are important. If you think that I'm not vulnerable to an injury, then those requirements may not seem all that important. And unfortunately, electrical injuries don't happen very often. They're one of the rarest when you compare it to the other fatalities in the workplace. And that for some organizations that may create a false impression that we don't have that problem or we're immune to that. And it can occur at the individual worker level too. They can work decades without an electrical injury.
Right.
And then one day a really bad thing happens. So understanding that hazard, that vulnerability is always there. And how do we keep that fresh in our
top of mind.
Top of mind.
So with those advanced risk factors, you said, how do people incorporate those into their existing electrical safety programs? Maybe is it to create a more proactive and effective culture? That's a really hard thing.
That's
it seems like
a great point. And just in the last 5 years, several of the leading organizations that are focused on safety have publications that can help an organization and individuals understand what we need to look at around these advanced risk factors. The National Safety Council, the Campbell Institute of the National Safety Council. In Canada, the province of Alberta, the American Society of Safety Professionals, and even OSHA have just in the last few years issued new resources, published documents that can help an organization think about what could we do within our organization.
And be proactive, like you said.
With the unique workplace that we have, with the unique situations that we have, to be proactive and think about that.
Because it's easy to get complacent.
Yeah. Those resources are easily accessible and for the most part are free. They can be downloaded just by searching for them. And I identified them in my presentation. And, anyone could get copies of that.
Perfect. Well, you end the presentation with advice about how to expand our thinking. So that's interesting of these risk factors, because maybe in cracking the code to further reducing these injuries. So tell us more about that theory.
Well, I think a key thing on expanding our thinking on that is recognizing that the regulations, the OSHA regulations and standards such as NFPA 70, the National Electrical Code, and other industry standards related to electrical safety are minimum requirements. They are the minimum requirements. Unfortunately, in the U.S., there's a big part of our safety culture in the U.S. is believing that if all we need to do is follow the codes and regulations standards and we achieve the level of safety that we want. Those codes, regulations, standards are extremely important and they help us get a long ways toward that goal. However, again, we need to recognize that they are minimum. We need to think about how do we go beyond. So a key question is, how do we go beyond? And I think the way that occurs is one, recognizing that they are minimum, and then engaging workers and management, safety professionals to think about that. If they are the minimum, what could we do differently? I look at it, I call it creating a lens of system safety. And without going into all the background of system safety, it was a technology that was developed to manage a lot of the hazards that emerged during World War II, advanced weapons and aviation. And that concept of system safety is embedded in safety management system standards today. But one way to think about that on a personal, very personal level is asking us 4 questions. After we've complied with the regulations and standards, where does the hazard exist now? Where is the hazard now? It hasn't gone away. It's still there, kind of hidden away behind all the locks, tags, and
Right.
enclosures. And so the next question is, well, how could any of those controls fail that would allow an exposure? What could we do different to add another 1 or more layers of protection to our workers? And how do we feel about that after we get that done? Maybe we need to go back and ask that question again. What could we do more? And it's going beyond compliance. And there's no magic bullet, silver bullet on that. It's engaging people and thinking. If what we've done is really addressing the minimum requirements, what can we do different? And being open and honest in a discussion around that.
Right. And
I've seen it work many, many times.
going beyond the compliance, that's a key theme there. So I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much, Lanny, for taking the time out. We always love having you with us at EC&M and your expertise and sharing that with us, whether it's in the articles you've written or the videos you've done with us, and we do appreciate it. So thank you
Well, I
so
know
much.
You use a lot more than just me in your literature and videos, and I appreciate the work that EC&M has done over the many decades. The magazine has been a force in the industry. Thank you, Ellen.
We love being here with you and at PowerTest 25 in Orlando. So thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you.